And we are going to discuss the film very soon. But first, I just wanted to welcome the CEO of the AAAS, Dr. Sudip Parikh, who is here apparently going to say a word of welcome.
Thank you, Ray. Hey, I came to this because I have to tell you that, we are, as everyone here knows, these are really challenging times, especially for our space program, especially for NASA. Even in the last few days, we've seen headlines that really bother me to my soul. And so one of the things that is really important to me is that we, first of all, celebrate the past. We celebrate the accomplishments that NASA, the folks who care about the space community, have put heart and soul into, but then also view it as past as prologue, as realizing that that when we are at our best, when we are at our absolute best, we can accomplish extraordinary things. And sometimes those things happen, and the creativity, the idea, that burst of creativity comes in a time of real pessimism. And so I want everybody to feel that. And so that's why movies like STARMAN, heroes like Gentry, matter. That's why they matter. And so I wanted to say that up front because it is important to me that you are on a stage here at AAAS, Gentry. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to watch a little trailer about this film. So those of you who have not seen it will know a little bit about it. It was screened here last night, and we had a wonderful time at the movie with popcorn and beverages, and it was a great film. The star of the show is Dr. Gentry Lee, who's right here on the stage. No doctor, he's better than that. And we have the director, Robert Stone, here, so we're very grateful. And the producer, Ray Rathrock, here. So welcome to our panel. Let's watch the trailer, and then we'll get into our conversation. Can we kick it off?
Roll 'em.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement. Those strange beings are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
0.5 degrees per second max.
One of the biggest philosophical questions is, are we alone in the universe?
It seems absolutely inconceivable that in this gigantic universe, we are the only living things and the only intelligent things.
We know today there are close to 1 trillion planets. This search is among the most profound of anything that human beings have ever done. My name is Gentry Lee. I am one of the most fortunate people who ever lived. That I could be part of the only generation that would ever explore the solar system for the first time. The pictures that came back astonished the world.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
The greatest value of science fiction is the way it opens your mind to possibilities. But if there are so many planets and a likelihood that life is going to emerge, where are they? Perhaps there is something about an advanced civilization that limits how long it survives.
Technology is what's made us human. Everything that's distinguished us from the animals is our technology. Spirituality will always remain because the universe will always be full of mystery. There will always be things we don't know.
We're seeking the answers of those questions every human being asks himself at one time. Why am I here? Why is there a world? Where life comes from, what forms it can take, what is its eventual destiny?
How is it possible that something so natural can be so beautiful? My colleague Arthur C. Clarke said, the technology of an extraterrestrial civilization will be indistinguishable from magic.
Okay, welcome again for those of you who have just arrived. We are discussing this new film, documentary, wonderful film called Starman with the producers and the cast here on stage. The film was shown here last night, and we want to talk about it today because we think it's a wonderful way of celebrating science, discovery, and its meaning and purpose for humanity. My name is Jennifer Wiseman, and I'm on the steering committee of the astronomy section here at AAAS. I'm an astrophysicist, and I have always been fascinated by the universe. But in particular, when I was growing up, that was the era when the Voyager spacecraft were being launched and were sending back these marvelous images of the outer planets and their moons. And I was absolutely fascinated by this growing up on a farm in the middle of rural Arkansas. We didn't have access to big universities or anything like that, but I knew I wanted to be a part of that, and I saw a lot of that through the Cosmos program with Carl Sagan. Well, there's a reason for that, and this film will, when you watch it, you'll see how the Cosmos program was birthed based on the work of Gentry Lee working with Carl Sagan. And of course, in that same era, we had the Viking mission, the Vikings that went to Mars. And this is something that Gentry was really one of the leaders, the energy, the brain, the vision behind making this mission a scientific success. So with that as my own background, it's a privilege for me to introduce to you these leaders of the film. We have the producer, Ray Rathrock, who had the idea in the first place. We have the director, Robert Stone, who's a well-known director of many outstanding films. And we have the star of the show, Gentry Lee, who was the engineer and lead scientist for the Viking program and worked in integral ways with the Voyagers and all the planetary exploration programs thereafter with JPL. And so with that as an intro, I want to welcome you, welcome our panel, and I want to start with you, Ray, to ask you, what was your original idea for the vision for this film in the first place? What spurred you on to wanting to produce something like this?
Well, sure. So, hi, everybody. Ray Rathrock. This is my third documentary, and my third with Robert Stone. The inspiration came from a conversation about our other space movie called Chasing the Moon, which got an Emmy nomination, and it celebrated going to the moon in the 60s. It's a 6-hour documentary, so you can download it and watch it on one of your international trips. Conversation with some colleagues, they said, Ray, have you ever thought about doing something about the non-human space exploration? And honestly, I said, no, I really haven't. They said, well, then you need to meet Gentry Lee. So I was introduced to Gentry, I called up Robert, and off to JPL we went, and that was it.
And let me ask you just a follow-up there. As you started working on this documentary, did it take a different shape than you originally visioned, or? Well,
sure, yeah. It had. We had originally thought about the Mars missions, right? And these were significant things, kind of like the Apollo missions to the moon. But when we got to know Gentry more about how all the things he had done, and the philosophy about what exploration means, and then his experience, I had no idea about the Arthur C. Clarke relationship or the Carl Sagan relationship. We had to expand it because we're going to capture a moment in human history here now for the whole world. And since we now live in a digital age where these things are now permanently in our record forever, this is like we have to get it all. So that's what it expanded. Robert can expand on that more than I can.
I'm going to skip over you just for the moment, Gentry. So, Robert, and do you prefer Robert or Bob? Robert, why did you want to direct this film? What made you enthusiastic about doing this? Love the T-shirt, by the way.
I would never have made this film had I not met Gentry Lee. I'm a child of the space age. It was 2001 is the film that changed my life, made me want to be a filmmaker, got me thinking about space, what's out there, are we alone? All these fundamental questions buzzing around my head my whole life. I never imagined I could put all this together in a documentary film until I met Gentry, because he has this unique capacity to tie together not only the missions that we've done to the planets, discovering the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, with the Voyager missions, the Viking mission, the first landing on Mars, which Gentry was central to. But he's also a renowned science fiction writer, having penned 3 novels with Arthur C. Clarke, 4 novels with Arthur C. Clarke, and other science fiction films. So he's probed the imagination about what it would be like to encounter an alien civilization and how would we possibly communicate. He's also fascinated, as I am, in this cultural phenomena that so many people believe that aliens are already here, and there's no mystery at all. I'm fascinated with that. And the discovery of exoplanets and the possibility of other Earth-like planets in nearby solar systems, and then the searching of the heavens with using radio telescopes to see if there are signals from alien civilizations that we might one day pick up. I'd never met anybody who could tie all this together, and when I met Gentry, we had a wonderful conversation over many bottles of wine, and I immediately knew I wanted to make a film about this, and I wanted Gentry to be the sole participant to tie his biography into, so it's a personal human story that also encompasses all these extraordinary ideas. And so we were off to the races, and we started this 3.5 years ago.
Fabulous. Thank you. And so now, welcome, Gentry. You are the star of the show. For the benefit of those who may not have had the privilege of meeting you or learning about you, can you say just a little bit about who you are and your career path to enlighten us?
This is a real challenge. This is the first time we have ever spoken to a group of people who did not see the movie. So I'm going to have to give you some information.
Some of you did. How many of you have seen the film? All right, so we've got a good mix. Some have. Yeah.
Am I on?
Yes.
Some, about half and half, it looks like. About half have seen it, half not. Yeah.
Hold it close.
Close to your mouth.
Okay. I began my career in aerospace 62 years ago after I finished my master's degree at MIT. And I had the privilege of writing part of the proposal for the Viking mission to land on Mars. And I then worked for 7 years, 16 hours a day with some of the smartest people that the world was able to find. And this is all in the film. And we were told by everybody that we were going to be a failure, that we should have just built a camera and put it in a sphere. Amy, you know how review boards act. But we were successful. And then after Viking was over, Carl Sagan worked for me. I'll tell you a funny Carl Sagan story. During the Viking days, Carl was always eloquent. And in operational meetings, my job was to have a 45-minute meeting and get some decision out the door. And so I had to make a deal with him that I would see him for an hour twice a week in my office, and he could talk as long as he wanted to. But during the operational meetings, he had to realize that we had to make decisions and get on with the job. And so we became friends. And at the end of Viking, we looked at each other and said, what's going on here? They don't get it. The reporters don't get it. The people don't get it. Don't they realize that human beings have, for the first time in history, built something that landed on another planet? So Carl said, well, maybe we should do something about it, but what? And I said, let's make a TV series. And he said to me, how do we do that? We don't know anything about making a TV series. And I said, 10 years ago, I didn't know anything about landing on Mars. And that was the beginning. So we had a few difficulties along the way. For those of you who like Cosmos, we had great ideas, But the people who were trying to raise the money for the show said, this isn't going to work. Nobody knows whether or not you guys can make a TV series. You have to find somebody who knows something about television. So I decided to watch about 50 hours of documentary television to find somebody who might be good enough to do the job. And I discovered a man named Adrian Malone, who had done The Ascent of Man with Jacob Bernowski, which still stands well. This is a long time ago. And we made him an offer he couldn't refuse. We didn't have the money to make him the offer, but we made it anyway, and later on, he indeed became so that was an absolutely marvelous experience. So you're looking at somebody who got to be the part of the first landing on the planet Mars, spent 5 years in partnership with Carl Sagan, 5 years in partnership with Arthur C. Clarke. Can you imagine a better life than that? And then these guys come along and say, we'd like to make a movie about you. I said, wow, that's just absolutely fantastic. So I went back after Cosmos and did my day job. We flew Galileo. For those of you who know, I was the chief engineer on Galileo. And somewhere along the way, Arthur C. Clarke came to visit the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And then there was a producer. In fact, the man who was the head of 2 studios in Hollywood was trying to get Arthur to make a film. This was after 2001, so Arthur's name was very big. But Arthur wouldn't talk to him. And so Peter Guber, it was the fellow's name, for those of you who want to know, said, well, what do I have to do to get to talk to you about the film I'd like for you to do? He says, you have to bring somebody interesting. Why don't you see if you can get Gentry Lee at JPL? Maybe he and I can have some interesting conversations while you're trying to sell me the movie. So we flew off to Sri Lanka, and we met Arthur in Arthur's house, and Arthur had 0 interest in Peter Guber's movie, okay? But Peter had to run 2 studios from Sri Lanka, so there was time for Arthur and me to be together. So we would go off and we would talk about things, and as we say in the film, Arthur said to me at one point, I like the way you think. Have you ever thought about doing any writing? I said, yes, sir, I have. And he said, have you ever thought about writing any science fiction? My opportunity sensor was going bing, bong, bing, bong, bing, bong. I said, yes, sir, I have. And he said to me, tell me an idea you've had for science fiction. So here I did. I rolled it out. Why not? You know, after all, what could happen except he could laugh? And he said to me, I've had an idea like that myself, but I had 3 problems. Guess what? I had already resolved 2 of them. So I told him that at dinner, and he went, whoa. Now, I'm not going to promise you anything, but if you'll come back, we'll talk about the possibility of writing science fiction together. So I went home. Now, you got to understand the scenario here, all right? I had just gotten married, and my wife had just given birth. And because of an earlier divorce, I didn't have any money at all, and so I told her, I'm going to take 2/3 of all the money we have in the world, and I'm going to fly back to Sri Lanka to talk to a man who might want to write a science fiction novel with me. So I went back there, and Arthur and I went up into the hills in Sri Lanka to a place called Kandy, and during the day we would talk, and then in the evening I was supposed to write up all the notes. That was what how he wanted to do it. So that's what we did. On the 4th day, he said, okay, we're going to write a novel together. And it's going to be by Arthur C. Clarke and Gentry Lee. And you're going to do all the writing, and I'm going to do the editing. And if you want to know why it's by Arthur C. Clarke and Gentry Lee, and not by Gentry Lee and Arthur C. Clarke, and he got that wonderful Pixius look on his face, and he said, because half of a large number is more than all of a small number. And so off we went. And we wrote Cradle first, and when we were halfway through Cradle, he said, you like Rendezvous with Rama, don't you? And I said, very, very much. And he said, and I said, and at the end you say the Ramans always did everything in 3s, remember? And he said, yes. He says, do you have an idea about what the follow-on book should be? So I spent a week. We wrote 14 pages describing what became the 3 Robin novels that we did together over 5 years, okay? And were sold for what was an insane amount of money in those days. And so my new wife said, I guess we're not going to be broke anymore.
That's great. Let me ask a follow-up to that. So we've thought a lot about the interplay between science fiction and actual scientific progress, especially with Star Trek and all of that. How do you see the interplay between science fiction and actual scientific discovery and visioning of humanity?
Well, this is a place where Arthur and I spent a lot of time. First of all, I have to tell you, the man was absolutely, unbelievably brilliant and imaginative. I mean, if you've never read any of his books, you should get out there and you should see them. I read Childhood's End when I was a teenager, and I said, oh my God, how is it possible that somebody can think about all this? Now, here's a very important point, and you're going to say I'm anal retentive, but it's important. Good science fiction is never implausible. It can be not, it has to be obey the laws of physics, and it has to be possible. Therefore, when I see a Star Wars movie and I see all these creatures from different planets breathing the same air, no, not going to happen. You know, that just violates my basic idea. And of course, as when a lot of movies have aliens looking like the Pillsbury Doughboy, that ain't going to happen either. All right. So when Arthur and I set out to write together, we said, let's celebrate the scientific method. Let's make sure that our readers know, we know, that they know how to think logically and to do science. And as a result, all of our work is not implausible. It may not necessarily be plausible, okay, but it doesn't violate the laws of physics.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have a question for our producer, Ray Rathrock, our director, Robert Stone. I repeat some things because people are coming in and out here. There have been lots of documentaries about space and even about what some of these probes and missions have seen and the images and so forth. We've had quite a lot of that. What's different about this film? Why did you want to make this kind of film in relation to a lot of the science documentaries that have come before? I'll start with you. Yeah.
Okay, so why did we want to make this film as compared to other documentaries? A couple of things. One, we have one human being that's been there for the whole time. I mean, you think about where he started. We were born in 1947.
I was born in 1942.
42, sorry.
I was conceived before
Didn't mean
Pearl
to
Harbor.
short-sell you. But you've been here from the beginning, and there's not many people around that have that. Point one. Point two, I learned a lot in the course of this. And I'm a pretty deep space enthusiast myself. I figured if I can learn a lot of other people can learn a lot. And then Gentry is just very contagious.
I can see that.
Yeah, he's fun to listen to, but I mean, I've been traveling with him for 10 days, and I've been riding home to my wife every night. Boy, you should have the gem I heard today. Anyway, so that was it.
That's great. Thank you. And so, Robert, what is your perspective? Is there something about focusing a documentary on a person that's different than focusing it on the information? Yeah.
Sure. Science documentaries, they're great, they're fine, but they have one big problem. They lack emotion and they lack human connection to their audience. They're scientific films. They can explain the technology and these incredible things that they've done, that we've done going out into space. People have tried to anthropomorphize the robots as a way to making these human stories, or focusing on the teams that work together to do this, and that's an interesting story. But what we wanted to do was to make it a very human story, an emotional story, and to really explain why we're doing all of this. It's not just to get a lot of pretty pictures of distant planets and to maybe discover some scientific knowledge here. No, we are looking to answer some of the most basic, fundamental questions that human beings have been asking themselves since the beginning of time. Why are we here? How did we get here? How did life form? Is there other life elsewhere? Is there perhaps other life that we could communicate with? Once you start thinking on that level, then the mission to Mars is more than just sending a robot and landing on another planet. It's the beginning of answering this fundamental question. The same with the Voyager, same with the James Webb Telescope. All of this stuff together is suddenly takes on a magical, almost spiritual quest that's very deep in the heart of all human beings. And that was what we wanted to capture in the film, and not just to make another science documentary.
I appreciate that. And I also think having a program centered around a human being, a person, really helps people connect more with the passionate drive of science. So, Gentry, back in the 60s and 70s, as we've heard time and time again, the space race was going on. And, you know, we understand that a lot of the motivation for the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo programs was the space race and trying to beat the Soviet Union to get to the moon and so forth. How is it in that environment that a mission like Viking that was simply going robotically to Mars, presumably to gather some information, also got birthed? I mean, was there also a kind of curiosity-driven push, or was that also part of the space race? How did that get started?
It had nothing to do with the space race. The missions to explore the solar system are purely about human desire to acquire knowledge that will help them understand who we are and how we got that way. And I would like to say another thing about the film for this audience. There is an intellectual subtext that is very important throughout the film. And that intellectual subtext is this, that we have a means of finding truth as human beings. It's called the scientific method, and that we can use that method for finding truth in many different realms in life. Okay. There is nothing overtly political in the movie, but if you watch the movie, you see that that what is going on and all the things that take place in the movie are embracing the fact that we have risen to consciousness because we understand logic and we understand how to find truth. And that is throughout the entire, everything we talk about, whether or not we have found any aliens. Incidentally, we quote from Cosmos often, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And by the way, I state explicitly in the film, there exists not one artifact of any kind ever brought back, ever discovered that can be reverse engineered and determined it was manufactured somewhere else. There exists nothing today that says that any alien or any alien's machine has ever landed on the planet Earth. If you believe otherwise, you are being misled and your mind is not following Occam's razor. And if you don't know what Occam's razor is, go away from here, Google it, and perhaps it will help you in your daily life.
Okay. Let me ask you, Gentry, a little bit about your thoughts about extraterrestrial life, and since you picked up on that theme, but I mean even simple life. You mentioned in the film that there is some thought that even what the Viking discovered is inconclusive, perhaps, about whether it shows signs of biological activity on Mars. Do you think that there's still a chance we might find biological life in the solar system? And what do you think about the current quest in astronomy to study exoplanets, which we can't sort of physically go to, but we're studying them vigorously through astronomy? Do you think this is a fruitful search?
I think it is a fascinating endeavor for the human species to try to discover whether or not what happened on this planet has happened anywhere else. Now, for those of you who haven't studied the history of life on Earth, I'm going to give you a 1-minute summary from an extraterrestrial's viewpoint. An extraterrestrial biologist would come to the Earth, would go back and would report, not a terribly interesting planet, all life is the same. All of it reproduces in the same way using the same major molecule. That means you, me, an elephant, slime mold, bacteria, to an extraterrestrial, we're all the same. So today we sit here not only knowing that this planet is the only planet on which we know for sure there's life, but we only know one way that life reproduces. This is fun. So there's two things that are going to happen. First, we are going to find life of some kind somewhere else. What? Why are you saying that? Because the numbers are overwhelming. Okay? We launched a mission 20 years ago, 18 years ago, that I had a lot to do with, called Kepler, that validated that there exist planets around other. We always postulated that they were there, but we now know for sure that they're there. And if the slice of the heavens that Kepler looked at is representative, and we have no reason to believe it's not, then there are close to 1 trillion planets in our galaxy alone. So you could go through all the probabilities of life forming, and sooner or later you say, it's just gotta be there somewhere. So the first thing that I would like to know, Jennifer, is can life evolve using something other than DNA? If we find any kind of life, that will be the first thing we want to know. Now, how do you get intelligence? Well, that's a bigger problem. For those of you who don't study it, we have had 5 major extinctions on this planet that have wiped out at least each of them, 60% of all the species. I had to explain that to my mother. I said, Mother, you don't understand. It's not 60% of one. You had dogs, cats, mice, and 60% of them gone forever. If that had not happened, you and I wouldn't be here. The dinosaurs did not allow any mammals bigger than this to survive. If you were a mammal bigger than that, squat, you were done. And if the dinosaurs hadn't been wiped out, we would have never been here in the first place. So, finding another place where life of any kind exists will open up so many fascinating questions. And why do we want to answer them? Because they will tell us things about ourselves. We are an autotelic species. What does that mean? We want to squirt our juice on another species to learn more about ourselves.
Okay.
No, autotelic.
Let me get back to science communication. As I mentioned at the beginning of this panel, I myself, growing up in a rural area of Arkansas, I didn't have access to knowing real scientists or universities, but by watching that Cosmos program, I was drawn into this fascination of space exploration and just basic curiosity-driven exploration and science. And then I fortunately had a lot of community and family support, so I was able to go on then and pursue a science career. I don't think that would have happened without the Cosmos program, and yet in this film, you describe the birth of that Cosmos program was basically from frustration that the public had really no understanding of why we do science and what the Viking mission was for and what you were trying to find. And so it birthed the idea for Carl Sagan and for you of the Cosmos program. Now we're decades beyond that, and I'm wondering what all three of you are thinking about where we are, the state of public science communication, the role of documentaries like this. How do they help in building enthusiasm from the public for basic curiosity-driven scientific discovery and exploration? And what should we be concentrating on as a community of science enthusiasts? Maybe I'll start. Let me spin the bottle here. I'll start with Ray. What do you think about that? Yeah.
Great. Thanks for that easy question. Look, Arthur C. Clarke makes the point in the movie that what differentiates humans from the animals is our technology. In Americans, in my lifetime, in our society, technology has gone from 5% of our world to over 65% of our world, as measured by the stock market. We care about technology. We have pushed technology very hard. So the problem is technology has gotten so sophisticated, we've forgotten how many people know what an internal combustion engine is? How does it work, and so forth? So we somehow have to still communicate the fundamentals about science and why it's important, because all this technology started with science. Technology is not invented out of the clear blue. It starts with science. Semiconductors, I could go on and on. But anyway, our world is now technology-driven. Our quality of life, our life expectancy is all based on technology. So we have to understand it better. Our leaders, our legislatures, our funders, people that take our tax dollars and give them out, they have to understand that technology matters.
Thank you. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's totally right, Ray, and a really important observation. I mean, in the course of my lifetime, the role of technology in our lives has just grown exponentially, and I think many, many people in our society feel overwhelmed. They don't understand how their house works. You know, they don't understand how their car works. Used to be able to open up your hood and say, well, there's a spark plug. Like, you know, nobody knows any of it. And so I think there's a rejection of science because it's so complicated and it's not being explained to people. So people are turning away from science and turning away from the scientific method. And once you do that, you kind of fall off a cliff and don't know what's true, what's not true. And without that, modern civilization that we have built and developed is just going to fall apart. So it's really important that those of you, you're all scientists here, communicate to the public better about what science is, what technology is, how this integrates with our lives. Even if it's so complicated you can't understand how it actually works, the scientific method is so fundamental in understanding reality. And I think, yes, that as Gentry said, that's an underlying theme in this film. And what we hope to do with this film is to, through Gentry, who's a wonderful communicator, communicate the love of science, the love of the scientific method. Science does not extinguish spirituality or mysticism or things we don't know. There are things we don't know. And we use science to discover and to acquire knowledge. And it's okay for there to be things we don't understand and don't know. But so the scientific method is essential. And communication, science communication, communicating with the general public is absolutely essential, or we're going to be in big trouble.
Thank you. And one of the things I appreciate about this film is that it's communicating, just as you say, a bit about the methods of science, but it's communicating the human enthusiasm behind, especially with Gentry, behind scientific exploration. And that's really key. And I love what you said, that science doesn't need to obliterate the other aspects of human life, like spirituality. In fact, science can actually enrich spirituality, enrich our understanding of how we should relate to one another, purposes for life. I'll put a little plug here for the AAAS program of dialogue on science, ethics, and religion, which is all about that conversation. So what do you think, Gentry? Where are we now in the state of science engagement and communication in our current society relative to when you were working on Viking and Voyagers?
We're in bad shape. I'm going to tell you all that it is my opinion that the degree of scientific illiteracy that exists in our country and among the leaders of the world is a prescription for disaster. And I'm going to tell you that the reason this scientific illiteracy exists is because you and I and the others we are insular. We talk to each other. We do not take the time to explain to people why we care about what we care about and how we come to conclusions. And that is, I'm telling you right now, Jennifer asked me during a meal, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? And I say, I am cautiously optimistic. Why am I cautiously optimistic? Because if we, you, I, and everybody who lives in this world of science and technology will wake up and realize that our survival as a species is dependent upon our leaders understanding what they're doing. I'm going to give you an example right now. AI. Do you think the leaders of this country know anything at all about what it can do and what it cannot do? Of course not. Do you think they have people around them that they are even able to determine who can tell them the truth and who will tell them bullshit? No. So what we have to do, you and I and all of those of us who do live in the world of science and technology, take 3 friends who don't know F equals MA out for dinner and sit there and gently explain to them why they should appreciate F equals MA. Don't hide behind your PhD in organic chemistry. One of the things that happened, the reason I did most of the press conferences on Viking is the project manager became so frustrated with the scientists who wanted to draw organic chemicals on the board. They said, Gentry, will you please just explain as a person? I said, yes. I want you to do that. I want you to leave this conference, go home, find 3 friends who don't know F equals MA, take them out to dinner and explain it.
That's great advice. Okay. Yes. So, and that includes, I know many of us here are scientists, but many of us are involved in science as science communicators, science policy leaders, teachers, just science enthusiasts. Whatever the reason is you're here, we all have this role to play to communicate to our friends, neighbors, and colleagues why science matters to them and why they need to support it. Okay, so we're on till 12:15 here. We have a few minutes for questions, and by question at AAAS, we mean a kind of one-sentence phrase that ends with your voice going up, and is
you have an axe to grind, put it on YouTube.
It's a question for someone on the panel, and Lauren will choose a few. I'm sorry. So go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So just a quick question. Back to what you mentioned earlier.
Can't hear you.
Hold it close to your mouth.
So a quick question. Back to what you mentioned earlier about internal combustion engines, right? Taking that as a framework. Does the fact that everything we deal with now is more complicated, right? It's more multidisciplinary, more complicated, more involved. Does that play any role in our inability to know?
Okay, I'm not sure that
I think I understand the question. I'm going to try to give an answer, and if it turns out not to be correct, we'll go. First of all, things have always been complicated. It is, today, it seems more complicated than it was, but in reality, resolving major issues in a society of human beings has always been a complicated thing. What I am talking about is a method to be used to make decisions. When you're building a spacecraft that's going to another planet and you don't know the answer to something, You have to check everybody's mind and try to find out what the right answer is. What we are not doing today is applying fundamental techniques of finding truth. I shouldn't castigate social media, but since I have a lot of children, I'm going to tell you that one of the worst things that happened as a result of the onslaught of social media is young people don't know the difference between truth and falsehood. And it is up to us. Our job should be tell them how they can find the truth.
Thank you. All right. Next question.
Okay. I'm a science educator and an epistemologist.
Closer to your mouth.
Science educator and epistemology is my field.
Okay.
So my question is, given the scale of the universe, we'll probably find some evidence that an extraterrestrial intelligence might have existed eventually. But for real interaction, don't you think that the distance and the speed of light are going to be an effective quarantine for interaction?
Okay. First of all, that question requires a long, involved answer. And all I'm going to tell you is that this has been discussed and discussed among scientists and science fiction writers for 5 decades. So I'm just going to tell everybody, you want to have a partial answer to his question? Read Cixin Liu's The Three-Body Problem, where a signal is received on the planet Earth from a clearly advanced species. Now, I'm also going to make another statement, because you guys, a lot of you didn't watch the movie. It does not matter if an extraterrestrial species in contact with us is malevolent or benevolent. It will have the same repercussions on human history, i.e., all the preceding human history will be insignificant. Okay? Think about that for a while.
We deal with that exact question in the movie. A central piece.
There's a whole section of the film about that very topic. And Lauren, there's a question here, but we've got a question first from here. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, yeah, so I teach Intro to Earth geology classes to non-science majors, so I appreciate your view on good science fiction being about, like, being plausible. So my question is, who's doing it right in terms of writers, TV series? Is it the Andy Weirs, the Expanse? So who's doing it right now?
Well, not all writers of science fiction support the idea that Arthur and I do, that it needs to be not implausible, okay? But reading almost anything, okay, I'm on a soapbox, and this is my soapbox. Any scientist who has never studied art, history, music is a shallow scientist. The idea for imagination that are necessary to solve difficult scientific and engineering problems do not all reside inside science and technology. If you were to ask me where my best ideas for new and different ways to do engineering have come from, they have come from my I'm a knowledge junkie. I have not spent my life buried in science and technology. I study the world's literature, the world's art, the world's history, all those things. If you're going to teach young people, tell them anything that opens their mind, that allows them to think outside the box. I did my graduate work at MIT, okay? I'm not going to tell you something that the MIT people didn't want me to say, and so I didn't. As an undergraduate at the University of Texas at Austin, I did a full spectrum of liberal arts. I did languages, I did literature, I did philosophy, I did psychology, loved it. At MIT, I was surrounded by people who had spent all of their undergraduate education, for the most part, doing science and technology. I learned more that was helpful in my life at the University of Texas at Austin than I did during my 1 year at MIT. Now, the MIT professors are telling me, we're trying to work on it, we're going to get there, and Ray's helping them. But a person, once upon a time, a very famous mentor for me made the following statement. In the beginning of the 21st century, a person who knows no science and technology is boring. I mean, a person who knows only science and technology is boring. But a person who knows no science and technology is ignorant.
Thank you. Okay. I think we just have time for maybe one or two more, and then I reserve the right for the last question. Okay, yeah.
A quickie. There's a recent paper, just came out February 3rd, so it's so new you may not be familiar with it. But there's a complex, and the papers are in review, but they've run complex computer programs that they were trying to get the role of what biology played in forming a planet in its atmosphere. What the answer they got was that you can get a rocky planet with an atmosphere, something like ours, without any life on it. And if you have any comment on that, that was an insight to me. I had never thought of such a thing.
Okay.
Enjoy the idea.
I'm going to be very quick. We will first be interested in a planet around another star when we find gases, disequilibrium gases in the atmosphere, which we can do from here. That will start the process of our trying to learn more about that particular planet, because we're looking for Earth 2.0. But we need, in order for us to do anything than have remote sensing, we need to make big steps that we have not made technologically. Today's technology means to get to the nearest planet around another star takes 10,000 years.
I would just add, as an astronomer myself, that finding planets that may not have life is still really interesting, right? Because I think all the other planets in our solar system are very interesting, and we haven't found life on them, but they're still interesting in their own right. So there's lots of reasons to study other planets and planetary systems. So, okay.
Hi, Mayra here. I do research on science, basically, and as a social scientist, I would like to hear
Can
from
you hold it closer to you? Hold the mic.
Okay. As a social scientist, I would like to hear from you in our journey to get and gather more knowledge and truth. What are the research questions that that I should be asking?
You're a sociologist?
Trained as economist, but mostly behavioral scientist.
May I extrapolate that and say, what do I think educators in general who are not scientists? Okay, here I go. People are going to get upset. I do not believe anyone in the United States should be able to get a high school degree without understanding fundamental science. We make it a requirement that they know English. We make it a requirement that they can add and subtract. I think there ought to be 20 fundamental principles that you can't get out of high school unless you understand. This would deter the selection of people to run our governments who don't know squat.
Okay, I want to ask a question here, or two. This film talks about curiosity-driven exploration, which I love. That's what got me interested in science in the first place. But of course, many people in our society, including myself, are very interested in applied science. You know, what can we do to get a near-term benefit from this investment? So what do you have to say about, you know, encouraging both the public support of basic curiosity-driven science, whether that's space exploration or in biology and other fields, versus the kind of pragmatic drive to have applied science with immediate economic benefit?
The acquisition of human knowledge from a historical point of view has always been to the benefit of the species in one way or another if it is properly used by the society in which the knowledge is there. I am both a scientist and an engineer. Ray is a fantastic engineer, and he said earlier, if you were listening, you have to have the science before you can have the engineering. And I believe that the society needs to recognize that you can't have engineering without the science. And so both should be the goal of a society. And although it is, go ahead.
Keep going. I just want to pile on one point.
Oh, you pile on.
So, yes, science before engineering, but engineers need to solve real problems, societal problems, that are much more than just technical problems. And we can do that.
I have to say, one of the things that bothers me the most about our society is the number of people who are not scientific and append the word science to whatever it is they're doing. And I am occasionally asked, what do you think about astrological science? And my response is always, hello? Those things can't possibly be used in the same sentence. And the people get upset with me. You know what? When I meet somebody, I do not tell them what sign I am.
Yes, as an astronomer, I get those kinds of confused questions as well. So we're talking here about the film Starman. Can you tell us where people can find this film and when?
Okay, so right now, the #1 documentary in America is Melania. Okay? So if you would like the #1 documentary in America to be Starman, we don't have $25 million to promote this film, but we need you to tell your friends to go see Starman. It will be on Apple and Amazon streaming starting on March 3rd, and it'll be there forever. And it'll be on other services as the year goes on. But we rely on the power of the ripple effect of word of mouth. And so if you haven't seen the film, check it out. Tell your friends. Grab a T-shirt. StarmanMovie.com. You can find all the information and share the trailer and all that stuff with your friends. And the message, all the stuff we've been talking about today is in the movie. And I think everybody, you're all scientists. You should support this.
Great. So I would like to thank our panel, Robert Stone, Ray Rathrock, and the star, Gentry Lee, for being with us today to talk about the Starman film. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And are these T-shirts free or wow, free T-shirts?
Take a T-shirt for you.